Say, man, I want to welcome you to a special late night edition of the War Zone. And hold on, let me check my privacy settings. Because for some strange reason, I can't get this thing just to give me the same privacy settings every time. So here's the deal. Here's the deal. Let's make sure we got it on. All right. First of all, push your share button. I told this man when he first got here, Millard House III, the superintendent. Millard House II. I wasn't the dude to fuck with and play with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a snippet. Tomorrow night, we're going to do the show, but I'm going to play a documentary. And you know what's so ironic? That the same shit happened in that documentary is the same shit that's happening here. Say, y'all, watch this shit. I'm going to bring you this heat tomorrow night. Watch this.
People often ask, what did this verdict cost? It cost everything. The legal system tried to kill me. I mean, it literally tried to destroy every aspect of my life.
I was like, oh boy, we were in a fight. It was real.
In every way, I was murdered. A wrecking ball came into the city. It didn't care who it hurt, what the consequences were. They simply wanted somebody to pay.
But watch them with handcuffs being processed. My God, you're talking about educators. We worked 14, 16 hours a day for kids.
Oh, trying to convince me to say I cheated.
I will die before I stand up and say I did something I didn't do. I'll die first.
I had to make a decision to cheat or not to cheat. I made the wrong decision.
It was one of the biggest scandals ever to rock American schools.
There is a held belief. Pedro Noguera talks about it as the normalization of failure.
That means you don't think black students could learn.
This was never about children. This was about a power grab for educational funds in the state of Georgia.
The Republican governor says, let me take over these failing school districts. Well, the districts are failing because you're underfunding these schools by $1 billion a year.
The cheating scandal was not about education at all. It was about changing public perception of public schools.
You made them distrust educators. Then you have to have other people come in to save them from themselves.
We wanted to get at the truth. Now, were we interested in putting some of the higher-ups in jail? Yes. They needed to go to jail.
There were 256,779 answers that were changed from the wrong answer to the right answer.
At this Georgia courthouse, you'd think they were indicting mobsters with charges like racketeering and theft.
The bail bondsman said to me, you would have been better off if you shot somebody.
All I want from any of these people is just to take some responsibility. But they refuse. They refuse.
Those same people who hurt children got on the stand and said, I hurt children. And everybody believed them.
The truth truly needs to be told.
I can show it to you tonight. HISD. Because you're doing the same shit. Before you got here, Millard, I went to Atlanta. I did a live stream from Atlanta to the news stations down here. And I pieced it together. And HISD, you never stopped. And I keep telling y'all that I got busloads of evidence. Now, if y'all ain't tired, I'll play this shit for you now. If you want to see it now, tell me you want to see it now. I'll play it now. And if Facebook don't take it down, I'll play it again tomorrow night. But what they did in Atlanta is what they're doing in the Houston Independent School District. And the district knows they're doing it. The district knows that they are doing it. So you wanted to play with me? I told you, don't bring your ass down to 3650 Alabama. And you decided to come down there and test them waters. Well, guess what, motherfucker? I don't bluff when I play poker. And since China want to see it, Kevin want to see it, Kim want to see it, Niecy want to see it, fuck it. Let's fire this bitch up. Hold on a second. Oh, hold on. I'm loading it. Okay. So here's the deal. I want you to get it to your board member, whoever over your schools. Kevin, Sterling is yours. And I think your board member is Patricia Allen. If you're at Madison, your board member is Myrna Guidry. If you're at Wheatley, your board member is Kathy Buford Daniels. I want to show you what they did in Atlanta, but they're doing it right here. And HISD, you got to know when to stand the fuck down. You wanted this smoke, I'm finna give it to you. So let's load it up. I'm loading it up for you guys, and we finna watch this. Here we go. Let me make sure I got it loaded. We'll make the screen bigger. And here we go. This
I am the child that was left behind.
is what they're doing to our children in HISD. So you teachers cheating on these tests?
Now to the school cheating scandal that is gripping the city of Atlanta.
And it's not the middle school students who are being blamed. Instead, they're teachers and school leaders.
A former superintendent and 34 for employees accused of an elaborate scheme to fake test scores.
Many teachers across this region blame the troubles here on No Child Left Behind, those federally mandated tests and the scores that measure schools.
Our education system has been under attack by various people who say that it's failing, it's obsolete. I don't think it's any of those things. We have incredible schools in wealthy suburbs, and we have underfunded and inequitably resourced schools in the inner city.
Sounds
and into this gap has come No Child Left Behind.
This was a job that needed to be done, if for no one else but for the children.
The Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal was about No Child Left Behind and the governor's attempt to privatize public schools. That's what it was about. That's what it continued to be about. And that's the reason for the entire trial.
The APS scandal was really about race, socioeconomic status. When it comes to education, we often marginalize a certain group of people, and they pay the price.
The cheating scandal was not about education at all. It was about changing public perception of public schools.
We have been going through a trial in court with no evidence, no money. I didn't get any money. No emails, nothing.
Try to look back and think like I want to slap myself. I want to say, wake up, Dana. These people are not on your side, but I thought that they were on the side of right.
I was labeled a whistleblower. Because of that, it ruined my life.
The legal system tried to kill me. It literally tried to destroy every aspect of my life.
In my opinion, this is one of the worst cases of black-on-black crime in history.
You could have written a better scandal than this scandal, and it presented itself under the umbrella of we're trying to help.
We're trying to help our children. It was done to our children. I'm Christopher Waller. I served as the principal at Parks Middle School.
I'm Dana Evans, and I was a principal at Dobbs Elementary School.
I'm Tamara Cotman. I was the Executive Director of School Reform Team 4 in Atlanta Public Schools.
I am Dessa Kerr, and I was a special education teacher at Dobbs Elementary.
Michael Pitts, former Executive Director of Atlanta Public Schools. My grandmother raised 7 kids in the projects in Miami, and all 7 went to college. So I've always had a mindset that no matter what your situation is, you can achieve in education.
I came from a poor environment, and I have a PhD. And it's not because I'm super smart. It's not because I'm different than any other African-American person out there. I just put one foot in front of the other and moved forward. And I believe the same thing could happen for the children at Dobbs.
I was actually born and raised in Wichita, Kansas. I was a classroom teacher, principal, and then I became the area superintendent for all the elementary schools until I was recruited to come to Atlanta in 2004. And I wasn't interested in the job initially. And when they came calling, they gave me the opportunity to work with African-American children, poor children who looked like me. There wasn't a lot of that in the city that I was born in. And so I really felt called to come here to serve.
I left Newton County to come to Atlanta Public Schools for an opportunity to become a principal. My superintendent there in Newton County, Dr. Wendell Clamp, strongly urged me to continue my work in Covington in Newton County. And when we talked about it, he would just say things like, you don't want to go up there.
Atlanta? Why would you go there? Why would you go where an all-Black school? Now I'm Black. Why would you intentionally go somewhere where it's going to be harder, you'll have less support and less resources? I was shocked because it wasn't white people saying that to me. It was Black people saying that to me.
I had a son that was born with spinal bifida. But when I got ready to send him to kindergarten, I found out he couldn't go. He would have to be bused to a school that was for special needs kids. I ended up being the PTA president and volunteering, field trips, everything. I had never planned to teach, but seeing the kids, I just fell in love.
I remember right before I came, there was an article in Ed Week about Dr. Hall, and it said something about she had terminated a large number of the principals that were here. And one of my principals at the time said, I can't believe you're going to go to Atlanta. They fire people down there. And she said, I worry about people who go to that place because that superintendent doesn't play.
I first met Dr. Hall when I was in the Harvard Urban Superintendent's Program, and Dr. Hall was on the advisory board. I could see her as a person who loved kids, who also knew a whole lot about teaching and learning, which is my passion. We then visited her when she was Deputy Chancellor of New York. And I could tell then we were so like-minded in terms of our desire to have the world understand your address is not tied to your intellect. Then in Atlanta, it was a 12-year journey.
When Dr. Hall came here in 1999, there was just a low expectation all around.
Many did not take to Dr. Hall because they didn't know Dr. Hall.
We were not good friends in the very beginning. We were kindred spirits on a mission together. Dr. Hall said to me one day, we can't be friends until we retire because I might have to fire you one day.
She was standoffish, but she was very, very, very busy, raising money for the district, looking at programs and interventions that actually worked.
Dr. Hall had a very isolated circle. I had her cell phone number, but I never called her on it. I dealt with my boss. My boss was Kathy Augustine.
And we would joke about it amongst ourselves. That was mafia style. They rarely dealt with principals. They dealt more with executive directors, and the executive directors dealt a lot with principals.
She talked like a CEO. So she was, of course, instantly embraced and pushed by the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. And so for a while, that worked.
I admired Dr. Hall. We got all new buildings, new materials, anything that we needed, we were able to get it during her tenure. That was wonderful.
When Dr. Hall came here, we found that the teachers' salaries in Atlanta Public Schools were lower than the average. We brought them up to the median so that we could attract teachers. She also started a leadership pipeline to train principals.
I came to Atlanta because Memphis at the time was considered one of the top districts in the country. Dr. Hall knew about my reforms. She wanted to implement that same kind of leadership in the District of Atlanta.
After I had a conversation with Dr. Hall and I realized she had very high expectations for children, no matter where they came from, no matter their background, their poverty levels, I believe the same thing.
She was named the Superintendent of the Year for a reason. She brought in Project Grad, reading programs, math programs, what works for this population.
Atlanta in 2006-2007 made adequate yearly progress in every one of our elementary schools. The Council of the Great City Schools says they know of no other urban system that can make that claim.
Basically, by the early 2000s, we were starting to see some big improvements in test results even then.
The state of Atlanta Public Schools was no different from any other inner city that's struggling with impoverished students. Some of the students that are dropping out, unfortunately going to jail, many of those students are also going to Yale.
But the fact remains, Atlanta is a very racially divided city. It's one of the lowest cities as far as the ability of people in poor neighborhoods to make economic gains.
The majority of our schools were probably within 5 miles of the federal penitentiary. It speaks to the fact that these schools were built in those areas and expected to perform just like the schools that are right around the corner, less than 10 miles from the governor's mansion.
When I first got to Dobbs, there were some obvious challenges that economics plays a part in. Most of the children live below the poverty guidelines.
Kids came to school hungry. They came to school dirty.
Sometimes the only time they ate was at Dobbs. There were children who were sleeping on the floor and in bathtubs. The poverty, I'm not sure if I was even prepared for what I saw.
At Parks Middle School, I saw chaos. I saw kids all over the building. I saw kids being disrespectful to teachers. I saw fights. Kids were assaulted sexually on their way to school. We had a young lady who had been sold on a city bus for crack. It was the kind of stuff that you never, ever, ever wanted to have to deal with in an academic setting.
I couldn't change poverty. And so I knew I had to galvanize the teachers and the kids to be able to see beyond the circumstances that they lived in there and give them enough hope and some real concrete skills so that they wouldn't have to have a future like their current situation. Then there was No Child Left Behind.
George W. Bush, who became president, elected in the year 2000, his very first program was No Child Left Behind. And he made the claim that there had been a Texas miracle. And that is that if you test every child every year from grade 3 to grade 8, and you publish those scores for the schools and for teachers, you will shame the teachers into working harder. Scores go up, the graduation rate goes up, the achievement gaps close. Well, it sounded like a wonderful, idealistic picture, except it wasn't true. There was no Texas miracle.
But that didn't come out until later. No Child Left Behind was a big deal in the early Bush administration. It got some bipartisan support because it promised to bring all this extra money into the system. However, what happened was you basically had a situation where the schools in the poorest neighborhoods with the least resources were going to be asked to have the same test results as schools in the most affluent areas that had the most resources.
As the urban schools have become populated more and more by kids of color, state legislatures have been not funding them adequately.
Georgia being 48th in the nation for public education goes to the heart of what's really wrong with our educational system, and it starts at the governor's office.
There's a formula, the way Georgia schools are supposed to be funded by the state. Once the conservative Republicans took over the governor's mansion and the legislature, they started underfunding the schools by small amounts at first, later larger amounts, and that cumulative shortage was $1.3 billion.
The business community got involved.
The partnership between the Atlanta Public School Administration and the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce did produce some results. There were contributions like the $25 million that GE contributed for science education.
Even though later on they people poo-pooed that in the paper saying the business community had all these agendas. The people that I worked with in the business community had no agenda other than making Atlanta public schools and education better and for the city of Atlanta.
However, what's missing in that public-private partnership are Atlanta's civil rights leaders, Atlanta's education leaders, and the parents and children who are, the recipients of that education. Of course, large companies are going to much prefer being able to decide, well, we'll give 25 million here or $1 million there or 500,000 here. They'd much rather do that than for the public to pass a tax that is going to guarantee a certain amount of funding every year. That's what Beverly Hall was never about. She was never about going to that legislature, never about saying we need to raise the property taxes, especially on those big mansions in the north side of Atlanta, to pay for those schools on the south side that really need that help. When you're shorting schools by $1 billion a year, there's no form of public-private partnership that's going to make up for that.
No Child Left Behind said that by the year 2014, 100% of all students would be proficient. The law laid out a very specific framework, and it said if you're not on track to meet the goal in year 1, you will introduce tutoring and you'll introduce school choice. And in year 2, there are other penalties. In year 3, there are more penalties. And by year 5, if you haven't met the goals, your school may be closed, the principal will be fired, all the teachers will be fired.
And that's always going to be a recipe for failure, especially when the teachers at the poor neighborhood schools are facing losing their jobs eventually, and even eventually having their local neighborhood schools closed in neighborhoods that have been challenged for decades, where in many cases the school is the only glue that holds that neighborhood together.
Say, man, y'all watching this shit? Talk to me real quick and then we'll get back to it. Don't this shit sound just like what the fuck we going through right now? This is the same exact shit. But it gets better. Y'all tell me, because we can stop or I can keep going. The same shit that we dealing with right now. They're not funding our schools. They're not doing what they need to do. So why would somebody even think about cheating on a test? Let's go.
The school is a sanctuary for kids. It's a place where they are going to be fed, that they are going to have at least one person that cares about them.
We talk about single parent homes, but a lot of these homes, there was not a parent. So we learned this term, no parent home. The child was raising the younger siblings. They needed a place where they could get away from it all and just be children. Parks Middle School was a sanctuary for the children.
And this is what Dr. Hall wanted. She wanted the principals, the teachers, the staff to be close to our communities so that they felt like they had support. We had high expectations that the buildings were clean, the teachers were of high quality, the principals were of high quality. The way we did everything had to be examples to students that we, 1, believed in them, 2, that we expected them to do their best work, and 3, that we were going to help them do it.
We automatically believe in education that Black and brown students are not successful.
There is a held belief that within urban environments, large poverty environments, minority environments, Pedro Noguera talks about it as the normalization of failure. These children can't learn because they're poor, because they're in one-parent families. And when Beverly started testing that, they couldn't deal with it. So they went to their default mode. And their default mode is to prove that children can't learn.
So once they saw that spike in test scores, they said, something is wrong here.
If you're concerned about test scores, poverty is the root source of low test scores. Poverty accurately affects test scores and drags them down. Whether you look at the SAT, the ACT, state tests, international tests, the poorest kids have the lowest scores and the richest kids have the highest scores. And that's just a fact.
Beverly Hall created a blueprint for urban children to succeed, from the boardroom to the classroom.
Dr. Hall came up with this internal target system where the targets were based on sort of how well you did the previous year.
She expected the school and the student growth to grow by 2 to 3% in every category, every single category. And then she expected your exceed level to grow as well. So she wasn't just satisfied with students meeting the standard. She also wanted students to exceed the standard.
There was this perception these targets were just unreachable. They were not feasible.
And they were a critical part of your evaluation.
I can tell you that the AYP targets were more rigorous than the local targets because the local targets fluctuated based on how well you did the previous year. So if your scores went up, your target may have gone up 2, 3, 4 points. Your scores went down, then the expectation was scores were dropped, the target was dropped, and you had to raise 3 or 4 points from where you were last year.
If you made target, the monetary reward may have been $1,500 if you made all of your targets. By the time they finished taxing it, you end up with about $600 or $700 maybe. Whatever came in, way more went out. We were spending money left and right to make sure that the students had what they needed to be successful.
I've paid people's gas bill. I've paid for extended housing for some of my families. I bought clothes for my kids.
And then Dr. Hall would have this huge convocation at the Georgia Dome. All of the schools in the district came together, and the schools that made targets, you sat on the floor. You were celebrated. If you didn't make targets, you sat in the bleachers, the nosebleed. It was humiliating to sit in the bleachers. And I remember the first year I sat in those bleachers. I told the staff, we'll never sit in those bleachers again.
When you have the government, the federal government, breathing down your throat and saying that outcomes matter, and based on these outcomes, it will determine not only your job, but the impact of resources on your district, you start doing things that are outside of the boundaries of what we classify as good.
Now to the school cheating scandal that is gripping the city of Atlanta. A former superintendent and 34 for employees accused of an elaborate scheme to fake test scores.
We wrote that first story in December of 2008.
It was a case that divided our city. Students in the school system were about 95% African American. So it was a system that was for and operated by African Americans. The issue was our newspaper here in the city, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is seen by a lot of people in the Black community as a racist newspaper. So as soon as the newspapers started to ask questions, Atlanta public school system officials developed what I thought was a very clever retort. You don't think that Black students could learn.
The way I think about the cheating scandal is that we didn't go out looking for Atlanta. Atlanta really came to us. After that story published, I started getting calls, and they were almost all coming from teachers in Atlanta schools. People talking about things that they'd seen, things that they'd heard. They were able to point me to other sources of information, primarily Deerwood Academy in Atlanta. We took a very deep look at only those retest results that were extraordinarily high in terms of the gains that they made on those retests and that were not believable. So at that point, we had no idea that this was really an Atlanta story.
My name is Naomi Williams, and I was a certified paraprofessional at Dobbs Elementary School. I've contacted the Atlanta Journal-Constitution to tell them about the cheating I witnessed. When I first got to Dobbs, it meant everything to me. My passion was working with special needs children. I worked under Dessa Curb, the lead teacher for the learning disability class. The atmosphere at Dobbs was pretty much a buddy system, and there was no room for, I felt, for outsiders. So that left a lot of teachers in a position that they knew what was going on, but they couldn't say anything.
I was starting to hear some stories about what was happening. One of them was from a parent whose son was a very young elementary age student, had come home and told her that he did great on his state test. And she said, well, how do you know that you did well? And he said, oh, well, because the proctor gave me the answers.
As testing time approached, I had no idea that the special needs students' test scores would be counted toward the overall test scores. Ms. Curb had asked this one student to go to work on her own. That particular child was a little bit more advanced than the other students. So she was capable of working independently. And when the child had gotten frustrated, she had started to mark all over the paper. She marked a lot of evidently wrong answers. She said, Williams, I need you to take her to this back table over there and erase all this mess that she has down here and get with her on the right answer. And my statement was, get with her on the right answer. If I got with her on the right answer, that would be what I know and not what this child knows. And I can't do it. I'm sorry.
We have children that can't do a CRCT. It would require someone sitting there to give them that test. Being a special ed teacher, I had some students that I had to actually point to the line, make sure that they were on the right line, and tell them to answer their question. I had a little girl with Down syndrome that was 5th grade, but reading on like a 2nd grade level, beginning 2nd. Had to take a 5th grade test. She took it, but it had to be read to her. And someone had to sit there and make sure she bubbled in on the right line. So, you had to sit there and say, number 31 in order to get it done.
When I made the decision to go to alert Principal Evans and I explained to her what had happened, I don't think she believed me. She kind of looked at me in disbelief. Not in disbelief of what I had to say, but in disbelief that I had broken that culture of silence by speaking out. She just left me standing there. And the humiliation just rested all over my body. I knew right then that there would be consequences to my actions that day. When I got home, my son said to me, Mom, Miss Evans called, and she said to tell you not to come back to work at Dobbs anymore, to report to downtown to OIR, which is the Office of Internal Resolutions, and they're connected with Human Resources.
Naomi Williams was sanctioned by the superintendent for throwing a girl down and spraining her wrist. Now that happened absolutely before I got there. I didn't know anything about it. When I got to Dobbs, she continued behavior that I felt was harmful to children, saying little things, and the kids would say, oh, she calls us names, she whispers in our ear and tells us we stink. There were still more complaints.
Bullshit.
When our 2009 story in October came out showing that the Atlanta schools had a much higher incidence of very suspicious scores than other schools in Georgia, we basically knew we had an Atlanta story at that point. We didn't know exactly what the scope was still.
I was not in town when the newspaper article was published. We were all at a national education conference. Dr. Hall was giving up her seat as the National Superintendent of the Year. I remember being in a room, about 8 or 9 of us from the district at this conference, and they called us all and told us that a story had just broken in Atlanta. And I remember my boss saying very clearly, lives are going to be ruined and careers are going to be ruined. And I remember thinking, well, I wonder whose career.
When the article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution went out about cheating, I mean, I didn't think anything could happen to me because I didn't do anything. I didn't do any cheating.
I'm thinking like, okay, now they know that I've made that allegation back in 2009. This could be my opportunity to be called back to work.
When the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution article came out, I was like, oh boy, we were in a fight. It was real. It wasn't going away.
Prior to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution article, at Parks Middle School, the teachers had complained about a new principal, Mr. Waller. He was, in short, cruel to them.
My name is Reginald Dukes, and I was the special investigator for the Atlanta Public School System's Office of Internal Resolution. I was asked to look into an anonymous letter that was written about some activities at Parks Middle School. It involved some complaints by some of the union leaders that were in the school there, were harassed by the principal for their union activities.
He would come into their classrooms, disrupt. He would hold long meetings after school. He would tell them that they were not going to have their job if those test scores didn't come up.
We got another letter, and they're talking about some cheating on the Georgia 8th grade writing exam. So my investigation led me to uncover that there was a prompt given to the students to prepare for that examination, the prompt had the actual answer.
Parks Middle School was what they called needs improvement. They were the only school in the region that had never made adequate yearly progress, which we hear all the time as AYP. That means they had never had enough students satisfy the requirements for No Child Left Behind. And then we started looking at the test scores, and all the test scores, you had to have a 300 to pass, but the test scores are coming in at 299. There had to be some things going on, because mathematically and statistically, that many students end up with a 299. My executive director was Mr. Michael Pitts. I would say something's not right about these scores. These sixth graders are coming here, Mr. Pitts, and they can't read. And I would tell him that, and he would say, well, you better stop saying that. You ain't got no proof. You demeaning your colleagues. You keep doing it, they're gonna start sending their kids to other schools, and your school gonna close down. The job was in the balance if you did not meet targets and make AYP. Mr. Pitts did tell me directly, the way people keep their jobs around here in Atlanta is they make their targets. Once I recognized for sure that there was cheating going on, I had to make a decision to cheat or not to cheat. So I continued to allow cheating to happen. I orchestrated the cheating at Parks.
I laid out to Dr. Hall all of the things that I had discovered during my investigation. I told her that there was cheating on the exam and that Mr. Waller was creating a lot of problems over at the school, and a lot of things were happening. When I finished, it was about 20 to 30 minutes, and she said, is there any more evidence? So I kind of paused and I said, no, nothing other than what I've just told you. And she said, okay, well, thank you very much.
This shit sound just like HISD in 2022. Let's keep watching.
And I walked out.
Whenever you have to go to OIR, which is the Office of Internal Resolutions, and they're connected with Human Resources, that basically meant that an investigation is being lodged against you. When I reported to downtown as directed to OIR, they met me with 6 or 7 allegations.
One of the children said she choked them.
There was some contact with the child. It was only a flip of his desk, what we call dumping their desk. The child got very upset and ran out and told her that I had choked him. I would never hurt a child. After about 30 days of being on suspension, then I get the letter from Superintendent Hall that now I'm being terminated. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess. Coming out of a divorce, I could not survive without that job. I filed a grievance with the district. I was seeking whistleblower status. I also contacted the media, trying to do whatever I could to get that status.
When the article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution came out about the cheating scandal, the school district put a blue ribbon commission in.
This panel did not find any evidence of cheating.
Dr. Hall pretty much came out and said that there was no problem. She basically all but refused to admit that the statistical evidence was pointing to a problem.
I am confident that aggressive, swift action will be taken against anyone who believes so little in our students and in our system of support that they turned to dishonesty as the only option.
When I'm seeing all these reports that there was no cheating over there, my first response was they're lying. They're lying, because Dr. Hall had said no one had brought to her attention that there was cheating in the Atlanta public school system. And I'm saying to my friends, I told her, I gave her a report in 2006 with everything on it.
The governor, Sonny Perdue, was not satisfied that the Blue Ribbon Panel had actually done a thorough investigation.
Governor Perdue even came down to our newsroom to discuss the cheating allegations in Atlanta. This was surprising to us because he was no fan of the newspaper. He did seem legitimately sort of very concerned about the impact on kids in the school district.
Well, basically all it was a school takeover.
It was exactly what the governor wanted from the very beginning.
Atlanta schools budget was about $500 million, and it continues to grow.
He wanted the funds that were going to these independent school districts under his own wing so he could control schools.
You know, once the Georgia's governor, the guy who's been underfunding the schools, suddenly he is like, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that there's cheating going on at these schools that I've been underfunding. You know, I'm going to appoint special investigator, special prosecutor, whatever. One of the people he appointed was Michael Bowers, who had to resign in scandal back in the 1990s for having a years-long affair.
We were appointed on August the 26th of 2010 by Governor Perdue. He indicated to us that the most important thing was to get at the truth. Number one, get at the truth. Number two, develop the evidence to get rid of bad educators. And when he appointed us, we gave the governor some conditions. We said, number one, if you want us to do this, we've got to call it as we see it. And number two, you get no preview of our report. The day we hand you our report, that's the first time you will see it. And he agreed to that.
I contacted Mike Bowers, who I knew, and I told him that I had worked that case and that I had some information for him. When he read my report, he said, this report indicates clearly Dr. Hall was informed. This is the first official information we have to indicate that she knew about it.
We started out with an erasure analysis. The erasure analysis is what gave us the leads.
Now, just to give you a little bit of insight, I told HISD 2 years ago, gave them all the documentation information that they were cheating at Energize for STEM. And if you ask them now, they'll say, that is not true. I know what I gave you. It's the same shit all over again. Let's go.
Erasure analysis was the result of dramatic rise in scores at Deerwood Middle School.
The people who actually did the investigation determined that anything more than 3.2 erasures was extreme. I have taken a lot of tests as a child and as an adult, and I can tell you I erased more than 3 times. I mean, I remember seeing the chart in the paper and seeing all these schools that were flagged. But when I found out what it took to get flagged, I thought, well, wait a minute. Who set that number?
Once the erasure analysis was done at Deerwood, they did a broader erasure analysis of all the schools in Atlanta Public School System. One of the schools that stood out was Parks Middle School.
In October of 2010, I get a phone call from Governor Perdue, and he says, I am directing the GBI to assist in the investigation of the Atlanta school system cheating case. That's what the governor ordered us to do, but you know, that's what the public was demanding.
Dr. Hall intimated to me that the governor had problems with her and the school district's success. And it was a Black woman, white man thing.
The examination of the supposed changing of the scores was done by a branch of the government that was almost all white and by a white Republican governor. And so we had the clear divide of the African American community believing that the examination or the criticism of the school system had nothing to really do with the merit of the school system, but it had everything to do with the people that were asking the questions. And those people were the white Republican governor. And when his investigation started, he hired 2 white lawyers to conduct the investigation.
The way the investigation worked is Richard Hyde, Bob Wilson, and I, and the GBI all worked on the investigation. We did it together. We had 50 GBI agents working with us.
The governor had made it plain, the special investigators had made it plain that we were not interested in prosecuting educators if they told the truth. If you tell us the truth about what you know and your involvement, if any, then you're not going to be criminally prosecuted. That's extremely unusual for us to have that ability to offer immunity to persons that they're suspects in a crime.
Were we interested in putting some of the higher ups in jail if we could? Yes. That was the prosecutor's job But were we interested in developing the evidence to do that? Yes.
City of Atlanta Schools was the only school system that did not fall in line when there was allegations of cheating. They were required to turn over information, and Beverly Hall simply didn't do it. That turned up the heat.
Dr. Hall couldn't understand what was happening, why it would happen if it did, and she believed that justice would always be done. And so she did not want our day-to-day work to be stopped by being involved in investigation.
And so, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I thank you again for the opportunity to share Atlanta's story with you, and I'll be pleased to respond to specific questions that you might have.
In the first interview we had, Dr. Hall indicated full cooperation, but as it turned out, that was totally false. We were blocked and stymied by not getting documents, by not getting interviews. And we asked the general counsel for the Atlanta Public School System, what is your main function? Do you know what she told us? That her chief responsibility was to give the superintendent of the Atlanta Public School System deniability at all times. That's how.
So here's a nugget for y'all. Like my friend told me, these kids get amazing scores on these STAR tests in middle school. But remember, when they get to high school, they can't read. And HISD. Kevin, this shit crazy, man. This shit is just like HISD. How in the fuck do they get to high school and they can't read, but they blowing the tests out the water in middle school in HISD? Let's go.
Outrageous.
My initial thoughts were, it's not going to be a problem. We're dealing with teachers. I mean, goodness, they're recognized and held in high esteem in the public. And then we get started into the investigation, and my goodness, you're talking about surprise to find out some of the attitudes of some of the teachers that we were talking to. And we've dealt with gang members that weren't as caustic as some of the teachers we were dealing with.
When the GBI entered the schools, teachers reported to us that they had Gestapo-style tactics. Teachers were barked at, words were put in their mouths, leading questions were asked of the teachers.
The GBI did not, I gather, understand, because they were being so mean, and I'm trying to explain to them, these are special need kids, and I have to show them where the line is. And they took it out of context and said, but that's cheating. I'm not used to being called a liar and a cheat. It was insulting.
I can tell you that anytime you have the Georgia Bureau of Investigation coming into schools and taking their guns out and laying them on tables and threatening teachers, telling them they're going to take their children away if they don't cooperate, there's something just wrong with that.
I'm at home watching the evening news, and I see 3 teachers making allegations of misconduct against GBI agents, saying that the agent screamed and hollered at them, that one teacher said, I was told that an agent took his pistol off and put it on the desk while we were being interviewed, demeaned us, and other allegations like that. Well, I knew that was a blatant lie.
The administrators and teachers looked at the GBI as the direct representation of Satan. So when they came into a school, they were very much disliked, they were feared, and there had been a lot of conversation even in the schools about not cooperating with the GBI.
At one point, one of the higher-ups sent out forms that said, go to hell, referring to us. And that's kind of tacky and petty.
Principals were under a tremendous amount of stress. We shared a stress relief strategy every single month. I said, you can't tell these people to go to this place, but whoever you're angry at, write it down, get it over with, rip it up. We had a good laugh, we moved on, but it was turned into something that it wasn't.
Our agency did over 1,700 interviews. Our case report was 121 volumes, 800,000 documents.
A lot of the interviews involved human beings who were desperate, overwhelmingly single moms, teachers who had observed or knew of cheating or had been involved in cheating. And they were trying so hard to hold on to the best job that they were ever going to get, teaching in the Atlanta public school system.
Teachers were subject to losing their teaching certificates simply for not talking. It turned into a witch hunt. As long as you pointed at someone, you may get out of trouble and may be able to continue to teach.
I heard just horror stories about the way people were talked to. They were threatened, but I came in here with a lawyer. So I didn't expect to be treated like that.
I was naive that I expected justice to prevail. I expected the right thing to happen. I didn't get an attorney where a lot of people were. And I think they were just more experienced than me and knew what this looked like. And so they got attorneys, and the attorneys said, don't talk. And so nothing they could be said could be used against them. When a GBI came and asked me, sure, I'll talk. I didn't do anything wrong.
They kept asking me over and over again, who do you think should be held accountable? And I kept saying, well, who cheated? That's who you need to hold. Go get whoever did wrong and deal with those people. That's who you need to deal with. The rest of us, you need to leave us alone.
But I realized then that this was something different. It wasn't just a simple investigation of truth and facts. It was going to be mixed in with lies and rumors.
When I met with GBI, I had mixed emotions. I figured this could really work in my behalf, or it could really backfire against me. And I'm like, Lord, don't let this get any worse. And the GBI reassured me that I had not done anything wrong, but they stated that you did witness somebody else. Is that right? After I finally got to explain to GBI what I'd seen, I knew right away that this would get me vindicated and get back to work.
I'm the last one to get a lawyer, to tell you the truth. I mean, I've been there the longest, and people know me. I'm like, what? They saw the schools that improved. You can walk in them. The State Department walked in and talked about how good they were. We had people from China. We had people from all over the world come to Atlanta Public Schools. You know how I know? I was the one who had to present to them when they came. I remember Mr. Pitts called me, and Mr. Pitts said, Waller, they got you down for a lot of races like y'all been cheating over there. And I said, well, Mr. Pitts, remember I wasn't there during the testing in 2009. He said, well, don't say nothing. Just wait and see if somebody say anything.
There were 56 schools that were targeted by the statistical analysis of having abnormal rates of erasures. And in our investigation, we had evidence and were able to prove that 44 of those schools there was cheating that was ongoing by educators and 38 principals.
Dr. Hall told us in the very first interview we had with her, and I was sitting in the room when this took place, I tell the principals there will be no failure. If the teachers can't get the scores up, we will get people who can. We will get principals who can get the scores up. I heard that with my own ears. Move the scores along, no excuses. And that's a formula for cheating. That's all it is.
Dr. Hall called a principals meeting and led us through this spiel that our hard work is being called into question. People didn't believe in the children, and people didn't believe our scores were true. And she was very encouraging and motivational that she was going to fight it and she would lead us through this, and the world would see there's nothing wrong with the children and children can learn. But even in that room, everybody was kind of looking around like, uh-oh. And I remember asking one of my colleagues after the meeting, what are you going to do? And he looked at me and said, what are you going to do? And I think the understanding was we're just going to see what's next. We trusted that Dr. Hall was going to handle it.
So Nisa Hamilton asked the question to say, so Tiffany, and she means Tiffany Gilliard Yates, got fired because she wouldn't cheat. I've said it since the scores came out. Tiffany Gilliard and Jackie A. Senior High School got the grades they got because they didn't cheat. They did not cheat. And that's one thing we're not going to tolerate down there. You're going to do it the right way, or I'll turn your ass in myself. But Tiffany Gilliard did not cheat. That might have answered your question, Nisi. Let's go back to the documentary.
I know that I was one of those people that believe that, well, the truth is going to come out and we'll all be all right. We didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I know this group of people didn't do anything. But I think when you start looking at the local politics in terms of what's happening now with the charter school movement and the destruction of public education really across the country, I think that this was sort of somebody's agenda or someone's plan to really attack a very progressive urban system that was showing that you could make incredible gains with kids despite where they came from.
It caused a lot of soul searching on my part because I was personally acquainted with a number of the top administrators. I knew that the people in our community were very divided, still under the belief that this was some kind of racial witch hunt, and that the Atlanta public school system was simply a victim of that witch hunt. And how could you, Mr. Howard, and African American, how could you take some part in it?
This was not a political ploy. This was not politically motivated. There were crimes that were committed. There were 256,779 answers that were changed from the wrong answer to the right answer. That is a circumstance that you cannot ignore.
Now, what he just said, if y'all been following me last December, I gutted a principal for the same thing, for cheating on the STAR test at the elementary school level. The erasures, the changing of the answers from the wrong answer to the right answer, and especially with the special ed kids, was exactly the same thing. The answers were all changed and all the kids ended up having the same answers. I did this last year. Let's go back.
178 teachers were implicated in the cheating, educators. 38 of those were principals. The principals, the head of the school.
The evidence was overwhelming.
The teachers were hiding tests in water coolers, having chicken fry parties to erase answers.
Teachers directly telling children, no, erase that answer and change it to this answer.
Once Damani Lewis came forward, who was the principal orchestrator of the cheating there at Parks. He actually named names, he could give dates, places, things that they did that you just couldn't make up, things that could be corroborated.
Now keep in mind that Parks had been lauded as the best of the best, but it was the worst of the worst. It involved the worst cheating, it involved the worst coercion of teachers of any school, probably in Georgia.
Christopher Waller would go to lunch with the administrator responsible for the security of the test. While Christopher Waller and the administrator would be out of the building, Damani Lewis would call the cheating team down. They would gain access to the tests that were in a locked room. Damani Lewis and some of the other educators actually went into an adjourning room and went up into the ceiling through the ceiling tiles and crawled across into the locked room where the test was secured. And before anybody touched anything in the office, they would photograph the office so that once they were finished cheating, they could put everything back exactly the way it was. 7 or 8 teachers would come into the room. They would have answer keys. They would divide up the test. They would erase wrong answers. They would change them to the right answers. They would put them back in their stacks and leave the office exactly the way it was before the administrator ever left.
In Parks Middle School, where Mr. Waller was a principal.
Sherry Stevens, it sounds just like Eastham. Lewis Bullock schools, I keep telling y'all, man. They're doing the same thing in HISD. Remember, if you look at the scores from HISD, you have nonverbal kids scoring higher on the STAR test than regular students. Let's go.
Testing was the beginning and the end of everything. Teachers were saying that he was a tyrant.
Christopher Waller created this pressurized environment that made it necessary for these educators to cheat in order to meet these targets.
I don't know why Parks was just construed as this criminal operation. It wasn't a mob style. Those who went and did it. Those who didn't. Only thing that makes this difficult is that it was illegal. And teachers don't pride ourselves in doing illegal things. We just don't. If I had known cheating was against the law, I would not have taken part in cheating. I really believe even the teachers who did do the cheating, in their mind, it was in the best interest of the students and the school.
There are so many shocking stories. I could sit here all day and my voice would give out.
I was a volunteer in the Atlanta public school system for 10 years. I was surprised when the cheating scandal was announced because I had no indication while I was in the schools that teachers were under pressure to get test scores up.
Pressure doesn't make people do inappropriate things. I have yet to walk into Wells Fargo with a pistol and demand their money.
Now, ESTEM, they take their test and they get to ride around in the car with them for hours doing whatever they want to do before they turn them in to HISD. I turned all that in to HISD.
Because I'm under pressure. I can't justify in my own mind that pressure makes people do unethical things.
There was cheating going on in many places. There was a lot of cheating going on in Houston. There was cheating in both in the test scores and also in the graduation rate. Whether the official.
Whoa, let's back up.
No indication while I was in the schools that teachers were under pressure to get test scores up.
Pressure doesn't make people do inappropriate things. I have yet to walk into Wells Fargo with a pistol and demand their money because I'm under pressure. I can't
Listen
justify in
closely.
my own mind that pressure makes people do unethical things.
There was cheating going on in many places. There was a lot of cheating going on in Houston. There was cheating in both in the test scores and also in the graduation rate. Whether the officials at the top were aware of it or not, we never found out
I
because
gotta do this one more
unlike
time.
Atlanta, there was no
I gotta do this
investigation.
one more
No
time.
indication while I was in the schools that teachers were under
God
pressure
damn it, I'm not
to
crazy.
get test scores up.
Pressure doesn't make people
They
do
never stop
inappropriate
cheating.
things. I have yet to walk into Wells Fargo with a pistol and demand their money because I'm under pressure. I can't justify in my own mind that pressure makes people do unethical things.
There was cheating going on in many places. There was a lot of cheating going on in Houston. There was cheating in both in the test scores and also in the graduation rate. Whether the officials at the top were aware of it or not, we never found out because unlike Atlanta, there was no investigation.
There was widespread cheating throughout the Atlanta public school system. They needed to go to jail.
My office is responsible for prosecuting criminal activity here in Fulton County, and that's exactly what we did.
I'm breathless from running downstairs. This is the first copy of the indictment across the clerk's counter. The clerk's office staying late to give this to the public.
On Good Friday, the indictment dropped. And I never forget that I had to preach. I remember preaching what's good about Good Friday. And I worked through the text when Jesus says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do.
And I see my name being flashed across the television. I've been indicted for cheating. I was really floored. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand. I couldn't see what I had done wrong. I just started crying. It hurt me so bad. And I cried, and it just, I don't know, it hurts now.
I was not expecting to be indicted. Everything I thought I understood about the investigation is they were looking for people who cheated. I couldn't breathe when I saw my picture flash on TV. My life changed on that day. It absolutely changed on that day.
I'm sitting up there looking at my picture like, what? That's when I really knew it was real. I'm like, and then I'm trying to read to see what I did because I don't know. They opened the paper and there I was sitting there as being an enforcer for Dr. Hall.
Education is more of an occupation of the heart. So it's like who I am as a person. How much do I give? How much Am I who I say I am? Am I ethical? Am I moral? Am I worthy of the opportunity to teach your children how to make decisions and how to think? And all of this negated that. I felt like I was a shell of who I had been. And I said, what do you want from me, God? What do you want from me, God? And I felt like I did something wrong. And I knew it wasn't what they accused me of. I knew I didn't cheat or allow people to cheat, but I was like, okay, I must have really displeased you.
These are school principals, teachers, test coordinators, even a school secretary, and they all have to turn themselves into the jail today.
Once the indictment came down, it was a huge circus. It was a mess.
We did what, every good attorney would do, got in contact with our clients, made sure we got a statement, made sure we got in touch with the DA's office to try to work out a turn-in and a bond. And it went left from there.
They expected all of these educators to turn themselves into the Fulton County Jail. And it was just ridiculous because the media was camped out. Lawyers were scrambling to get their clients there in time. There was the perp walk being filmed for the media, for the local news channels.
It was a shame the way they were paraded to the Fulton County Jail, the way they were shackled. Even career law enforcement officers were appalled at the way this circus turned out.
When we got to the jail, they handcuffed you, they fingerprinted you, they did a mug shot, told you not to smile. The judge hates smiles, that's what they said.
I had never been to a jail, patted down and charged with anything. I didn't even have an attorney.
I walked in, one of the guards said, you know my mom. And I said, really? She said, yeah. She said, you're a really good educator. And I was like, thanks. She was like, but I'm gonna have to handcuff you. And she said, you have to turn around. And so I turned around and she handcuffed me.
The irony is it was April Fool's, right? It was April the 1st. I was like, is somebody gonna bust out with the April Fool's joke? When is this gonna end?
Then Dr. Hall came in. Dr. Hall said to me, this is bad. Good luck with this. Do what's best for your family. Those are the only words she had ever spoken to me concerning this whole ordeal. It was a surreal feeling. Like, this is it. This is it.
Dana Evans' bond was initially $1 million.
A high bond is $100,000, $500,000 for aggravated assault. These bonds were in the millions. It was ridiculous and unnecessary.
Now, these are teachers. No criminal record, never been in trouble before.
My lawyer was like, I talked to Judge Baxter and he said he agreed that your bail was outrageous. My bail was $1 million. I actually went to the bail bondsman because my bail was $1 million. And the bail bondsman said to me, you would have been better off if you shot somebody.
I really believe that a big push for the bonds simply had to do with the fact that the media was involved.
All the parents I've spoken to said that the former principal here, Christopher Waller, is, quote, a stand-up guy, that he cared a lot about these students. The investigation, though, suggests that he cared more about those state test scores.
Chris became the poster child for the cheating scandal. He was a minister, he was a father.
My wife was pregnant with our twins. The real estate market had crashed and she had been a broker. The bishop had just assigned me from one church to another church. We stood to lose everything.
At this Georgia courthouse, you'd think they were indicting mobsters with charges like racketeering and theft. But the accused thugs now fighting serious jail time are 35 Atlanta teachers, principals, and test coordinators.
What the media portrayed was sensationalism, and it portrayed it as if it was throughout the entire school system and involved essentially every educator.
It permeated every part of the city in a way that made us look like we were murderers.
Former Superintendent Beverly Hall, Tamara Cotman, Michael Pitts, Christopher Waller, former Parks Middle School principal, and many others charged with racketeering.
The Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organization Act, RICO, is used normally to get large criminal organizations like drug dealers or mafia or kingpins. These teachers in no way were jointly deciding to cheat so that they could all put money in their pocket. They did coordinate cheating for the purpose of helping the school and preventing the school from being closed down, but it didn't rise to the level of criminality that RICO implies.
There was no money gained. The money gained was minimal. People think it's hundreds of thousands of dollars out there that people made off children's backs. It was a bonus of $3,500 collectively out of the 12 people, and none for the executive directors. Zero.
Judge Baxter was pretty much on the track that this had to go to trial. It was going to go to trial one time, and everybody was going to go to trial together.
It's very difficult for a judge to handle a case with as many defendants and attorneys, and then to handle a case that takes so long to conclude.
In order to understand this story, was spanned over many years. It involved many schools. It involved thousands of witnesses. We could tell the story one time in a really clear, concise, and cohesive manner that would make sense to people.
Without the RICO Act, the state would have had to charge many of the defendants individually, and some of their charges would have solely been misdemeanors, which has a penalty of up to 12 months in jail at the most. One of the things that would have occurred had it been a misdemeanor is that Paul Howard would have not been the prosecutor. Misdemeanors are prosecuted by the solicitor, and at the time, the solicitor passed on prosecuting this case.
It should have been at least 13 different cases. I believe that there would have been a different outcome had everyone been tried separately.
Dozens of educators erased wrong student answers on state standardized tests and inserted the right ones.
And erasure analysis, that was the essence of the case, the essence of their proof. The scientific evidence that was proven to be faulty. Let's get real. They didn't even know how to judge what an erasure was.
Even during the trial, when they were asked for the computer system that looked at and analyzed the data, our lawyers were told that system was no longer active. It had been destroyed because the company no longer engaged in test screening, so they couldn't provide that to us.
For overall responsibility, the report points to Beverly Hall, the school system's former superintendent.
She's accused of firing teachers who couldn't produce higher test scores, giving bonuses to those who did, and ignoring clear signs that teachers were cheating to make the scores happen.
Investigators say Hall either knew of the cheating or should have.
The narrative that was being pushed was that Dr. Hall was the mastermind behind a Atlanta public school system-wide orchestration for cheating, as if Dr. Hall was a mob boss.
I do not believe there was any way possible for Dr. Hall not to have known about the cheating from the very beginning, much less at the end of our report. There was too much evidence of what was going on. She had to have known.
The investigators wanted Dr. Beverly Hall's head on a platter. And anybody who was willing to be party of that, they were happy to have you at that table.
Their agenda somehow was to get Dr. Hall. And it was hard for me to watch because she was very ill and they would make statements about how she wasn't really sick.
Anytime that you can hear that someone has stage 4 cancer and then suggest that they be tried via Skype, that says a lot about where your thought process is towards that individual.
Can you tell the judge if you remember about how many children were there in the Atlanta public school system during this time period?
Around 47,000 students in that range.
Let me ask you this. Did you direct others, executive directors, principals, assistant principals, testing coordinators, teachers, to change answers, to improve scores, so the Atlanta public school system would look good and everybody would get a bonus? Did you do that?
No.
Did you admit to doing anything like that when you spoke to the special investigators?
What I saw with Dr. Hall was that light going out. I saw her heart breaking. Beverly had such faith in the justice system. So to even think about being on the other side of the law was something that we couldn't think about. We couldn't imagine that. And Beverly just kept saying, I'm quite sure after them looking at this, they'll see and justice will be done. And then we could move on.
Here's what's ironic about the entire case. The people that were actually doing the cheating were the ones sitting on the witness stand.
I remember thinking how perplexing it was that witnesses would be called to testify against people that they had absolutely never met. It's not every day that a former governor comes to a courtroom willingly to testify against somebody that he's never met, doesn't know anything about.
Christopher Waller came in and testified. Damani Lewis came in and testified. Teacher after teacher at Parks Middle School came in and testified. And I must be honest, I was appalled at the things I heard about Parks Middle School.
The tests would come to the school wrapped in plastic, cellophane, paper. Damani Lewis was asked by Christopher Waller, do you think you can get into the test undetected? And Damani Lewis said, I think I can. And he came up with a scheme where he would use a razor blade and a cigarette lighter. He would slice open along the seam of the plastic cellophane paper a slit so that he could slide the test out. They could make copies of the test, which is the way in which they created the answer key. He would put the test back into the cellophane paper, take the cigarette lighter, and melt the plastic back, and thereby leaving the appearance as though the test had been, unaltered.
I've heard the story that Damani has said he cut into some plastic saran wrap with a razor. I didn't have a key to give Damani Lewis for him to go in and cut the razor and all that stuff. I didn't have a razor to give him. I don't know who carries a razor around. I just don't know why he'll be walking around Atlanta with a razor blade.
I wasn't surprised at trial that Parks became the poster child. When you looked at the evidence and the sheer facts, the numbers for the cheating levels at Parks was extremely higher than the others.
It was the poster child for what was wrong with Atlanta Public Schools. But the problem is this: no one at defense table had anything to do with Parks Middle School.
So Chris Waller entered a plea deal.
Honorable Judge Baxter, students and parents of Parks Middle School, I am standing here to plead guilty to my participation in the cheating activity at Parks Middle School.
As a portion of Chris's plea, he had to make an apology, like many of the other defendants, and express exactly what he did wrong to the judge at the time he took his plea.
I orchestrated cheating by several teachers and fostered a culture of cheating that continued even after I was not at the school. As the factual statement read by the prosecutor shows, my role was continuous for several years, and I accept responsibility for this conduct, which was unethical, immoral, dishonest, and criminal. I did not make the right decision. I made the wrong decision. There are times I wished I could do that over.
There was no way he could go to trial and expect to win. So he did the right thing for him and pled out. In doing so, I think he tried to throw some other people under the bus. He stated that Dana Evans, my client, was sharing information with others to aid them in cheating. Well, the information that Dana Evans was sharing, we were able to prove at trial, was public information. But Waller made it sound like she was cheating by doing this.
He said that I sent him a letter that gave him the weights of the tests, standardized tests, and that allowed him to know how many questions were going to be in what area, and it helped him to cheat. I thought, what? He's trying to say that I gave him something for testing, but then on the stand, the testing expert testified that content weights are not used to cheat. And we produced 300 pieces of evidence. I had 15,000 emails. Not one email was there any indication in any way that anyone told me anything. There was not a report to the Office of Internal Resolution. There wasn't anything in writing. There was none of that.
The people that deserved to be on trial were the witnesses after witness that were called in by the district attorney's office. Some of them broke down on the stand and said, yeah, I cheated and I did more than I told the DA's office. But yet they had immunity.
There's this crew of people who were unhappy at Dobbs under Dana. They were assumed to be telling the truth, despite my warning to the DA that they have their own agenda in coming to court and testifying. They are the least credible people I've ever had the displeasure of cross-examining in 30 years of practicing law.
I was contacted by the prosecutors at the homeless shelter that I would be one of their key witnesses as a whistleblower. Now, finally, everybody understand that what I did was the right thing, and now I can get vindicated.
Those same people who hurt children got on the stand and said, I hurt children. And everybody believed them.
I don't have a great answer for what I believe happened at Dobbs Elementary. I believe teachers cheated, and they admitted to cheating even before Dana got there. I believe that the rise in test scores was not so dramatic that it couldn't be explained by the strategies that Dana and her staff were implementing. But I also can't explain why certain teachers would say that they told Dana that there was cheating going on. I can't explain why they would say that.
It was a lot of things that were done in that courtroom that are not conventionally done.
I was really surprised that each defendant did not take a plea deal, accept responsibility, and take no jail time versus the risk of actually going to trial.
The plea deals were not as straightforward as they seem. So it wasn't that I could say, I did it, and then they let you go. You had to say you did it, and then you had to implicate someone else. I need you to say something about Dr. Hall. I need you to say something about Mr. Pitts. I need you to say something about someone else that may or may not be true in order to get yourself out of trouble.
I'm listening to these things and I'm thinking, okay, people are going to figure out there's no credibility here. They're going to see this for what it is. I really wasn't concerned. I sat there. My lawyer always told me, just look straight ahead. You've already been accused of having intimidating looks, so just don't look at anybody. So I sat there for 10 months looking straight ahead, believing, okay, nobody's come in here and said that I did anything wrong, that I did anything but cheating. I'm going to be fine.
But the attacks were relentless, and they everywhere you went, and it broke my resolve.
And so at some point, it's human nature for the jury to just turn off and decide, you know what, we're tired of hearing it, and we're just going to put everybody together and assume that everybody cheated. For me, what I had to try to do was really get the jury to focus on Miss Curb and really separate her out from everything else that they had heard. In my closing remarks to the jury, what I hammered home to them was that if Miss Curb was a cheater, then she was the worst cheater ever. It just doesn't make sense if you have 35 of 39 sections as a failure that you are changing answers from wrong to right.
We knew that there was going to be a long trial. Now, we didn't think it was going to be 8 months, but when you spend 4 months on people that are not on trial, it draws it out. When your case starts falling apart on the state side, it draws it out. But no one can prepare for the longest trial in Georgia history.
It was devastating to my law practice. I'm a sole practitioner. Which meant during these 8 months of trial, I had no other business that I was able to do or that was coming in.
I don't think people realize when you go to court every day for 10 months, you can't go to work. I was in court all day. So, you run through your savings. I ran through my retirement, my marriage, and I've got all these things that I'm dealing with. So I can relate to being at the rock bottom and planning, working on an exit plan, but it was real. It was so real. And for whatever reason, my life was spared. I literally received a phone call as I was sitting there researching clean ways to commit suicide.
Good evening. There's no harder lesson than the one taught today to 8 Atlanta educators by an angry judge after they were convicted on charges typically reserved for mobsters. He threw the book at them.
We're waiting for several days for the verdict. Finally, we get a call that the verdict is in.
There's a light that comes on, telling you that they've reached a verdict. So everybody starts running. And my first indication that something was wrong was the show of force in the courtroom.
This is a huge courtroom packed with deputies who are there to keep order no matter what the verdict is going to be. It really was a scary few moments waiting for the jury to come in and read their verdict.
State versus Sharon Davis Williams, conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. We, the jury, found the defendant guilty. State of Georgia versus Tamara Cotman, We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Michael Pitts, guilty. Dana Evans, guilty.
On April 1st, 2015, I was convicted of racketeering.
For a case that had such circumstantial or non-evidence, we got convicted.
As the verdicts were being read, it was shock. It was legitimately, oh my God, we lost.
By the time they got to Dana, I was not hopeful. She was found guilty of the RICO conspiracy, and that was just devastating to me.
I think I wasn't prepared for the justice system that we exist in.
You're talking about people who just come to school every day. We worked 14, 16 hours a day for kids.
People were just amazed. How did they get convicted? I thought there was no evidence against them. But what they did not see were the 144 witnesses or so. They did not hear the children testify. They didn't see the documentary evidence. So it was a big surprise to them.
I couldn't believe that they had found all these, it was guilty on all charges. And I'm going, no.
State of Georgia versus Dessa Kerr. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
And when they said that verdict was supposed to be not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, I was so thankful. I knew I had been blessed.
It is absolutely possible that some of those teachers that were found guilty truly were not guilty.
Had nothing to do with cheating. I was not aware of cheating, did not participate in cheating. That's one of those things that remains out there that will always be a question and will always be doubt over all the teachers' heads who participated.
When the administrators were found guilty, it was just shock. I felt my stomach sink. I felt my mind start to flutter. And then I thought back to some of the statements that Judge Baxter had made during the course of the trial about what he was going to do.
There were thousands of children that were harmed in this thing. This is not a victimless crime.
We heard from every single witness that she's an excellent teacher. She should be allowed on probation to give back to this community.
The reality is that if you don't accept responsibility, there's no recognition of harm, then a lot of times you get what you deserve.
The judge wanted to make a point, and he made his point. And so the moment when the judge said he's going to take him into custody was like a punch in the stomach.
We're going to have to take everybody into custody today. They've been convicted, and they're going to need to be processed just like anybody else.
Something very unusual happened between the verdict and the sentencing, something that most legal scholars have never seen.
The judge said to the 11 defendants who were convicted, listen, you guys should go and work out a deal with the district attorney.
A lot of people don't understand and don't know that another offer was made for them to admit guilt, which 2 of them did, and get a reduced sentence.
Back in court today, only 2 decided to take the plea, which included home confinement or weekends behind bars.
They simply had to do one simple thing, and that is to accept responsibility. So we had 11 defendants who were convicted, and 2 of those defendants decided to accept responsibility, and they received probated sentences.
All I want from any of these people is just to take some responsibility, but they refuse. They refuse.
I think it was a deep-seated sense of arrogance and entitlement that prevented them from accepting responsibility.
For me to stand up and say I did something that not only I know I didn't do, anybody who's ever worked for me, worked alongside me will tell you that my integrity and my character are impeccable, uncompromising. So I can't take a deal. I will die before I stand up and say I did something I didn't do.
I don't know. I think about that now. Like, if you would have known what you know, would you have taken a plea at the beginning? And I still think that I wouldn't have. There has to be people who are willing to stand for truth, regardless of the personal cost. The actions of people who take a stand have effects that we enjoy today.
3 disgraced educators, former teachers and administrators, were sentenced to 20 years, serving 7 in prison, the rest on probation. The others, including a principal and elementary school teachers, were sentenced to 5 years, serving 1 to 2 of them behind bars.
Ms. Copman, you've got 1 count. I sentenced you to 20 to serve 7.
So people often ask, what did this verdict cost? It cost everything. The legal system tried to kill me. I mean, it literally tried to destroy every aspect of my life. I had a right to expect a jury of my peers to look at the evidence and make a decision based on what they heard and what they didn't hear. I continue to fight because I'm innocent and I'm maintaining my innocence, and I'm going to stand by that.
After participating in the investigations and testifying to what I was asked of me, I felt abandoned because there was no support by the school district, nor any support by the judiciary. It seems as if everything really blew up on me. So here I am years later, 8 years to be exact, and I've lost everything. There was never a gain from my coming forth, I don't feel.
If they would have taken away my money, that would have been one thing. Or if they'd taken a job away, which was hard, they did that too. But I would have survived that. But to strip you from everything that you were. I think there's a lot of ways people can kill you. Physically, obviously, murder you, kill you. You kill me financially, you can kill me intellectually, you can deny me the right to learn the way others do. You can kill me spiritually, you can kill me. And I think that in every way, I was murdered.
In Beverly's final moments, the only thing I could promise her was that the real story would be told and that I would continue to pray for justice to be done.
Public School Superintendent Beverly Hall has died.
I know Beverly's at peace in terms of eternal life because she was a good servant. But the heartbreak is that she will never be able to tell her own story and reap the rewards of knowing how much she gave children and changed education for this country.
I want to be careful because I don't want to talk ugly about somebody who's passed on. I really do not. More than anything else right now, I feel sorry for her. I really do. She lost focus.
I think the winners are the students who matriculated through APS while Dr. Hall was there for 12 years.
When you look at the actual results of what went on those 12 years, it was better.
Very first graduation I went to at Carver High School, there were 32 chairs on the stage. 32 students graduated. The 9th grade had at least 380 kids. I think we served a lot of kids very well because that same school at Carver, the last graduation I went to, had more than 375 students to graduate. I think the losers are the students who were not achieving before, and certainly the students afterwards.
The Atlanta Public School cheating scandal was much deeper than cheating.
This case was about Beverly Hall and the governor. The issue was the control of the Atlanta Independent School District and whether or not the state was going to be able to take it over. That was the beginning, that was the middle, and that was the end of this case.
It started with people not believing that all children can learn, and that you had a trailblazer, an equity trailblazer like Beverly Hall, define that long-held belief that they could.
In fact, Atlanta was progressing faster than almost every other urban district at the very time that Beverly Hall was there. So you might say that whatever she was doing, there were some good things, and the teachers didn't need to cheat.
Here's the truth about Atlanta Public Schools. Martin Luther King Jr. is a product of Atlanta Public Schools. Some of the greatest Atlantans have come out of Atlanta Public Schools. So for someone to intimate that African American children taught in Atlanta Public Schools cannot learn needs to read the history of Atlanta.
This is Atlanta. This is the home of historic HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. They are just in the shadows of this building. You know, this is the heart of the civil rights movement. And how is Atlanta going to continue to thrive if we are doing this kind of disservice to our children?
When you look at the number of African American teachers who were involved, Black people not doing fairly and well with Black children, fully knowing that education is the one thing we have that can cause us to be successful.
Atlanta, a star city, was misused in the minds and eyes, opinions by the righteous people here in this city and used by folk who are about making a buck.
This was about shifting money from one place to another place. And you couldn't just do it. You had to change the mindset of the place where the dollars originated from. So you changed the community, you made them distrust educators, you made them think that they weren't doing what they should be. And so then you have to have other people come in to save them from themselves.
We are now in the midst of a massive push coming from Washington, D.C., and from most of our state capitals to send more public money to non-public schools. And by non-public, I include charter schools in that.
Charter schools are what's sexy right now. Everyone wants their child to go to a charter school. But the little known secret is that charter schools are actually doing worse than traditional public schools. And another thing about charter schools is they suck all of the resources from traditional public schools.
About 5% of kids go to charter schools, 10% go to private and religious schools, and the other 85% go to public schools. That's where the kids are. And if you care about our future, you have to care about public education. All of this is a reflection of the distortion of education, the distortion of saying that test scores are the measure of all things. I think the standardized tests, they've become a poison in American education.
But unless we really know the history of what happened and why, and the people who were at the top pulling the strings are held just as accountable, if not more accountable, as the people at the bottom who are having to do the dirty work, this is going to happen again.
So I want to show you something. Y'all sit tight. Don't go nowhere. I want to show you something. Now, as you heard the young lady saying, that this happened in Houston. Let me go read something. This is something that was just sent to me from an article. But twice in the past 7 years, AJC found Houston exhibited fluctuations with virtually no chance of occurring except through tampering. In 2005, scores fell precipitously in 6 classes in 38 schools after a statistical analysis by the Dallas Morning News suggested test tampering in Houston. The district fired teachers and principals and improved test security. In 2011, however, as 3/4 of Houston teachers earned performance-based bonuses, scores rose improbably in a similar number of classes in the same number of schools. In the same year, Houston confirmed 9 cheating allegations and fired and took action against 21 employees. I'm going to stop that right there. Is it still going on in Houston? Sure, it's going on in Houston. You know, I got receipts. Let's open this last screen. And what I'm going to do, let's make sure I got it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my emails. You can see me. I'm in my emails. All right. And I'm going to pull up an email. Let's check something. I want to see when this was. This was in June 27, 2021. Let's open this up. This is a letter about Energize for STEM that came from a teacher on the campus. So let's say HISD says they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Well, I'm going to tell you, they do know what I'm talking about. Let's go down, and it details a lot, but I only want to get you to one paragraph. Let's go down here, right here. So if they say this is not happening in Houston, this is your in-district charter schools, eSTEMs, that's owned by Lois Bullock. Let's read what it says. I'm going to see if I can make it bigger for you guys, as big as I can. Okay, so here we go. We're looking at this paragraph right here. That's June 27, 2021. During each STAR administration, faculty and staff was on their phones and laptops. Hall monitors was watching TVs and laptops on phones. Also, we had to go to the Bissonnette campus to get STAR testing materials, bring them back to Beechnut campus. When the test was over, return the STAR testing materials to the Bissonnette campus. I did this process several times. During one STAR testing I administered on April 6, 2021, the principal called me at home with you say, I don't know what she's trying to say right there, but and say on April 8, 2021, stating, I said the school does not follow protocol in 30 days. I think she made some typos. He was demanding I answer his question and explain to him what 30 days mean. He even threatened me to state he will call all parties to his office, confront me over the phone. Furthermore, he stated, I will call TEA to get to the bottom of what the he say, she say was. I had to submit to the principal, the agency, Blazing Brooks, I worked through paperwork that I was receiving mental health services for the principal to stop harassing me over he say, she say, especially while I was at home sick. Also, at the time the principal called me, I was at home sick from the vaccine. Also, Miss Ejima was present during the call from Ann Reese. So here's the thing, y'all. During the STAR test, I was administering the hall monitor. Miss Watson came into my classroom, interrupting the class. Ann Reese and Calmer were distributing dictionaries to the classes the morning of the STAR test. Ann Reese, Mr. Calmer, and Mr. Watson has a friendship with the principal outside of school hours. They also falsify information for signatures. I was in the middle of distributing STAR testing material to the students. Mr. Watson asked the students, did they know how to use the dictionary? If not, he was going to give them a quick review. I interrupted Mr. Watson and shared with him he could not give a crash course on dictionary usage on the day of the exam. Mr. Watson went to Mr. White, which was administering the STAR test, next door to tell him that I did not give students their dictionary. Mr. White left his classroom to address me regarding providing students dictionary during the test. I explained to Mr. White, I am going to distribute the dictionaries. However, at the time, a student was asking a question because she was absent the previous day. In reality, Mr. Watson was upset because I would not allow him to give a crash course in dictionary usage due to the hostile environment created for me. I felt I had room to defend myself. Hold on a second. So what I'm trying to tell you is that Energize for STEM, they've been cheating on the STAR test. They never stop. I dropped it tonight. Energize for STEM, cheating on STAR test. Osborne Elementary. You go from a 59 to a 96 or a 98 from one STAR to the next. Mathematically speaking, it's not possible. See, this is where they get caught up at because they do dumb shit. The district knows they're doing it and they do nothing about it. You understand what I'm saying? So the thing is they want to play this shell game with me. But the problem is I'm sitting here with this information. Now, this is a woman that worked at Energize for STEM. So what I want to do, I want to go back and I want to let you see. You see these emails? This is all the information that I compiled in less than a month on Energize for STEM. And what they were doing on these tests. This information was turned over to HISD. So even if HISD comes back and publicly says that Gary Monroe is a lie, I keep my receipts. They never go anywhere. Anywhere. So even if you were able to get into my emails, it's too late because I have multiple email accounts that you don't know about. And I've shifted this shit all over the country. It's everywhere. And if anything happens, that information will be released. So I will say this. Millard, I told you not to come fucking with us down there in 3rd Ward. I told you. I also said that I had more than enough information to bust your district dead in the ass. I told you. But see, a lot of y'all think I just be bullshitting and running my mouth. No, I got this shit, man. And there's nothing they can do about it now. So this cheating is continuously going on in Houston. Last year, all of these schools passed the STAR except for 21 of them. Schools, I'm talking about numbers were this low, and then they take the STAR last year and they're way up here. We watch it, we know. And it's not possible for you to do it. So you celebrated that. You celebrated knowing that some of your people cheated on the STAR. Now, do I feel sorry for the educators that got caught up? No, I don't. Because you're cheating our kids out of the basic foundation that they need in order to be successful later on in life. Do I feel sorry that they didn't take a deal? I wish they had never offered them a fucking deal. They didn't need a deal. What they needed to do was go in there and do what they agreed to do, which was educate our children. You asked me a question, Niecy Hamilton. Did Guillory get removed because she didn't cheat? I'm going to say this again. I believe that Yates got the scores that our kids rightfully got. I believe that. And I know they didn't cheat to fail. They did the best that they could do with what we have been given to work with, what she was given to work with. They performed at their highest level. So things that y'all need to look at as red flags in the Houston Independent School District. How does a kid blow the STAR out of the water in middle school, but yet show up in the 9th grade at Yates, Madison, Worthing, Wheatley, and they can't read? If they couldn't read in the 9th grade, ain't no goddamn way they could have read STAR test material. So who taking the test for them? This shit ain't rocket science. This ain't no conspiracy. It's massive cheating in HISD. I didn't know if I had to rent that tonight. I'm going to replay it tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And I want you to think about it. There are things that you saw and heard in that documentary, and they pointed out that Houston was cheating. Houston is still cheating. Houston has a moniker about them, whether it's public officials or school systems, that they're going to cheat until they get caught. Until they get caught, it's not a crime. And you can best believe they got some eyes on them. So Millard House, you sitting around here, you playing this shell game with me. But guess what, homie? You playing checkers. I'm playing chess. I told you don't come down there fucking with us. Now, if she had done something wrong, then you come down there and do your job. It ain't nobody gonna buck with you because we want what's best for our children. But this thing that you got where you're gonna attack these black schools, I'm gonna shut your ass down before you ever wake up. And by the time you leave Houston, you will never get another job again. It won't happen because your actions are going to dictate that you don't. When I turned in Peck, people said, this can't be real. Yeah, it was real. And I proved it. And I can prove this shit too. So what I want you to do with your district officials, when they get smart dumbasses, is go sit down somewhere. Pick your fights wisely. Don't fuck with Sterling. Don't fuck with Wheatley. Don't fuck with Worthing. Don't fuck with North Forest. Don't fuck with Yates. Don't fuck with Booker T. We ain't putting up with you moving our principles no more. Keep Ponce away from our people because he don't like black people. But if you violate any term of that agreement I just gave you, I will drop your fucking school district. And that's what it is, partner. So if you looked at that documentary, if you want to watch it again tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, I'm going to have it on. We're going to watch it again. Because everything they said is exactly what we dealing with right now. Not 8 years ago. Right now. These teachers are under immense pressure to deliver these fucking test scores. These principals are under immense pressure to deliver these test scores. And if they're not delivering them, then you're getting them out of there. So, Mr. Ponce, you made a comment, and then I'm going to let you go. Tiffany Guillory was not fit to be the principal of Yates. Ponce, Rick Cruz, Denise Watts, Max Maul, Bird, and Millard House. You are not fit to work in the Houston Independent School District. And right now, just like those people had an option to tell the truth, maybe get probation, the judge was lenient in that. He didn't even have to offer that. I'm gonna make you an option. I'm gonna make you a deal. If you get the fuck out now, you won't be locked in the Texas penal system for the next 10 years. But if you stay and you play this game of chess with me, I'm gonna lock your fucking queen in a corner. Checkmate. Tell her Monroe said that. I'm finna bring more smoke than the turkey leg hood. Y'all have a good night.